Welcome back to The Heat. We're talking about Barack Obama's legacy in the Middle East. Let's get back to our panel. And Raghida, you've talked about President Obama's relationship with Saudi Arabia, with Egypt. We've heard about what is going on in Yemen right now. Would it be fair to say that President Obama appears to be suffering from some kind of trust deficit in places like Saudi Arabia and Egypt? They just don't trust him there.
Yeah, absolutely they don't. I mean, to be honest with you, they can't wait for the day when he goes. In Egypt, they can't stand what Obama did to them. From their point of view, their point of view is very clear, that he embraced the Muslim Brotherhood and that he insulted the army of Egypt, he and his cabinet, that he insulted the Egyptian army. And you could feel the dislike, maybe hatred for what Barack Obama did. And as far as Saudi Arabia, they have no love lost for him, but it's not as strong of hatred like the one that the Egyptians feel for President Obama. From the point of view of the Saudis and the other Gulf states, they feel a sense of betrayal, basically. They just feel, we've been with you with this traditional relationship, we've been loyal to the United States, we've done everything you asked us to do, and all of a sudden you turn around, you go to the Iranians, you strike a deal, and you forbid us to be part of it. So from their point of view, the consequences of the nuclear deal are at their expense. Then there is Syria. I mean, Syria is really a point of departure, because I really believe that Syria is President Obama's Rwanda. It is amazing to see an American president turn around and pretend he doesn't see what's happening in Syria. If I may add one more thing, take a look at what the Obama policy administration did in terms of the power of Russia in the region. Russia is a very powerful country here. The Russians are making fantastic relations now with Egypt, filling the gap, sitting pretty while the Americans are really second fiddle. The Russians are controlling the situation in Syria to their advantage. They are in a strategic relationship, a strategic alliance, basically, with both China and Iran. And they are doing quite fine while President Obama decided to lead from behind. All of these things didn't really produce a legacy that is to be mentioned in this part of the world as one to say, yeah, I remember what this man did for this part of the world. No, it's the other way around. What this man did at the expense of this part of the world, that's his legacy.
Abdel Bari Atwan, you talked a moment ago about the situation in Yemen, but if we look at what is going on in Yemen right now, in Syria, in Libya for that matter, at any point in these two terms, did you see any strong evidence of an administration that had a well thought out, strategic, grand plan for the Middle East?
No, to be honest, I never traced any sort of, a solid strategy of the Obama administration when we talk about the Middle East. You can see, he regretted that he gave the green lights for the NATO to bomb Libya and to remove Gaddafi, simply because of the anarchy which is spreading, the Islamic State or Daesh, which actually managed to establish a base there. When it comes to Yemen, it is, to be honest, it is an affront to United States and to his administration here. The poorest country in the Middle East actually bombed, and for the last 20 months, and the American actually supplying the Saudi regime with missiles, with warplanes, with spare parts, with ammunition. He never said, enough is enough. We know that wedding parties were bombed, funerals were bombed, hospitals were bombed, schools were bombed, markets, open markets were bombed, and people are really starving there. The children of Yemen suffering from malnutrition. So this is the problem we are facing here. The American, the leader of the free world, the leader of the free world. So they never intervened to put an end to these kind of atrocities. The same thing we talk about in Syria in particular. He never reached a political solution. He never actually was decisive and put an end to this war. So the man actually is left everything to rot, and he is leaving a very, very dangerous area.
Hamoud, what did you make of President Obama's efforts to resolve the dispute between the Palestinians and the Israelis to try and get to a two-state solution? He did make some effort. He was rebuffed by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Was that just a token attempt? And to what extent, to be fair to the president, was he undermined by his own U.S. Congress here.
And that's the tragedy. I think one would think, as mentioned earlier by Bari, how in his speech in Cairo, Barack Obama made the resolution of the Arab-Israeli conflict or the Palestinian-Israeli problem as one of his priorities. But I think what's happening behind the scene is that today Israel is the most benefactor of the conflict in the region. The Israelis have never been punished or shown clear consequences of their failure to resolve or to give the Palestinians the right to live as dignified people. In the meantime, you have facts on the ground that are changing. The two-state solution is no longer a viable solution. And if we were to have a solution today and buy that two-state, whatever that state is, and we still question it, whether it's an S capital for the Palestinians or not, we're still questioning that. Where are you going to have it? A lot of change has changed on the Israeli-Palestinian issue, and in part because the United States has made it not a priority, while at the same time serving the Israeli interests. The Israelis to the interests are best protected more than ever in the past. And then there is and what we've seen today, I mean, the idea of having, as always, discussion coming back, having Jerusalem as the state capital of the Jewish states. So these are real issues that Barack Obama failed to deliver. And in more ways than one, there is some blame on the Palestinians that the Palestinians have yet to put in their hands in order. The Palestinians that they put too much on the Oslo, delegitimizing the international rights or the human rights of the international community, and putting too much on the American to resolve the conflict. The Palestinian problem is serious, and the expectations that we hoped that President Barack Obama will do something in it has been sort of a big failure. If not, the Palestinians today, by any card you use, are worse than they were 8 years ago. And this is a tragedy that we seem to ignore time and time again.
Raghida, what is your view on that? Was this a missed opportunity for President Obama, or did he feel very early on in his administration that there was just too much of a risk to try and resolve this dispute between the Israelis and the Palestinians, a risk that he could pay for domestically?
Yeah, he tried. He certainly tried. One cannot say that President Obama and John Kerry did not try. They certainly gave it a good shot. John Kerry, the Secretary of State, went back and forth umpteen times. No, you're right. What you said is correct. The Israelis did not want the deal. I'm not so sure the Israelis want the two-state solution, and I'm not sure they will. But this was not the only, this was early on in the administration, the first administration. Thereafter, we don't really hear about that. What we see about, what we learn later about what happened in this part of the world, I should say, is that, for example, the rise of Daesh. This happened on Barack Obama's watch. There was no Daesh during the time when George W. Bush waged his war on terror in Iraq and beyond. But the rise of Daesh had a background. Maybe it started with what George W. Bush did in Iraq, but then that was, history would say, Daesh happened on the watch of Barack Obama. When you look at the rise of the battle of Aleppo and the battle of Syria, I know Bari Atwan wants to speak about Yemen, and I agree that Yemen, any attacks on civilians must be condemned. Any war crimes must be condemned wherever they are. And the Yemen situation, of course, there is a background to it. The Iranian meddling in Yemen through the Houthis and beyond. And also this is an issue of the border security, the national security of Saudi Arabia, where Iranians were coming through Yemen to do what they had for their agenda. But in Syria, it is even, take a look at Bari speaks of the children of Yemen. They are not any more dear than the Syrian children. Right. Aleppo is not only a tragedy, I must say Aleppo is a cry of shame on everybody here in this Arab region and in the United States and Europe. And again, it happened on President Obama's watch.
Abdel, Bari, Atwan, Raghida Dergham, Hamoud Salhi, thanks to all of you for joining us.